Hi, it's Pam from Ben McFuzzylugs, here with another dog training tips, a dog training video every day for the month of March. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about extinction bursts. So what an extinction burst is when a behaviour has always had a certain response and then that response doesn't happen anymore. It's a kind of frantic repetition of the behaviour before it ceases altogether. So that sounds kind of complicated, but the best way to explain it is if you think of a coffee machine. Now, you put £1 in the coffee machine, press the button, and out comes a coffee. So your behaviour is pressing the button, and what happens is out comes the coffee. Now, if one day you put the money in, you press the button, and you don't get coffee, what happens, what most of us do, is press the button a few more times. This is your extinction burst. You're repeating this behaviour just to see if this is going to happen anymore. But this is the extinction burst. You press the button a few times just to see if you can make the machine work. It's exactly the same for dogs. Now, if you think about it, if every time you've come in, your dog bounces up to greet you and you give them a fuss, then bouncing up to greet you gets your attention. And if suddenly you decide that you're going to train your dog by no longer rewarding this behaviour. Now, I will come into alternative ways to train something like this later. I wouldn't even often recommend using just ignoring as a good method of training. But if you decide that you're no longer going to reward the dog for bouncing up and you just stand and ignore them, what is going to happen is the dog is going to bounce more. They're not immediately going to realise that they're not immediately going to realise that the rules have changed. So you have to be patient if you use this method. One of the biggest fallouts in this kind of training is you can actually teach your dog to be more persistent. Because if what happens is, imagine you're sitting watching the telly and your dog brings you a ball or prods you and wants you to play with them. And so every day you just kind of throw the ball without thinking, and then you think to yourself, no, I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to stop the dog telling me when playtime is. So you sit and ignore him, and he brings the ball, and he brings the ball, and he brings the ball, and this is his extinction burst. He keeps doing this, and eventually, after a short period of time, you're a bit fed up, and you go, oh, go on then, and you throw the ball. So now the dog's new behaviour in his head is not just to bring the ball once. He thinks, okay, well, I had to bring the ball like 5 times last time before he threw it. So you've taught the dog to persevere more rather than just expecting a one-for-one behaviour there. If they bring the ball to you, they have to keep on bugging for a little while to get it to work. So if you later on decide you're going to try even harder to teach the dog, then your extinction burst is going to be longer. They might go like 10 or 20 times trying this now because they're going, oh, I have to be more persistent. It worked more. They keep on going. And so again, if you give in at this point, then they're just going to learn to be more and more persistent in their begging because you've taught them to keep doing it for a longer period of time. If you're going to use an extinction burst in your training, you have to not give in. No matter what happens, you have to let the dog work through his extinction burst. Just the same as if the coffee machine didn't give you coffee on the first press of the button and you press it 3 or 4 times and suddenly it gives you coffee. The next day when you're there, press the button, doesn't give you coffee, you think, oh, it must be the button stuck, and you press it 3 or 4 times. And then if you do that for a week or two, if suddenly pressing it 3 or 4 times doesn't work, you're going to press it quite a bit longer going, no, it's just the button stuck, I have to keep going. So it's exactly the same with the dog. If you're going to use it as a training method, make sure and be patient, because what can happen, if you're doing that, not letting the dog jump up and you're just going to ignore them, if you've taught them to be really, really persistent, they can keep doing this for some time, and it can really become a battle of wills, which is why I don't suggest this as necessarily the best method of training. But just be aware, if you actually make it that the rules now are this never happens again, then the dog will learn. You just have to be patient. So if every single time you come in, you ignore them when they're bouncing up and down until they're doing what you want, then eventually the bouncing up and down behaviour will go away. If every single time they bring you the ball and bug you while you're trying to watch a movie, you do not respond with play, then they will learn not to ask for play in that way. So I hope that helped. I'll be back tomorrow with some more training tips. Thank you for joining me.